So a long time ago, I did a whole bunch of videos showing off all of the classic Sonic games. That was basically when I started my channel. It's been a really long time since I actually looked back at the classic era. It's also been a long time since I looked back on the adventure era and stuff. So I figured this was a good time for me to do a Sonic retrospective. Like, this is something I've been wanting to do for a pretty long time. Just so I could, like, reminisce about the Sonic games that I like, and celebrate them, review them. Well, not review them technically, but more talk about my opinions on them. I guess I'm going to be sticking to the main games. Like, I'll go over the Game Gear games, but I'm not going to be talking about every single spin-off. So, I guess we'll start with the Genesis titles. For Sonic 1, I really like it. The main problem with it, though, is the pacing. You got Green Hill Zone, which is pretty nice. It's got a combination of speed and platforming. And then you go straight to Marble Zone. And Marble Zone, well, we all know how that is. It's very slow paced. It's literally based around waiting around on a block. If it was just about platforming, like actual jumping around, then I would like it. But it's just not. It's just waiting, and that makes it mind-numbingly boring. That is the second level in the game. And after that, we got Spring Yard Zone, which is full of bumpers sending you in directions you don't want to go, and rollers that randomly slam into you. The levels are not in the proper order. I think it would be best if the level design was like, it had Marble Zone and Labyrinth Zone at the end of it, just before Scrap Brain, and Starlight Zone was the second zone, and Spring Yard was the third. Like, that way, it would be a lot more, it would have a much better difficulty curve. Sonic 1 is definitely the most platformy of the classic games. It might be the second most platforming Sonic game ever, right behind, like, Sonic Colors for the Wii. But I like it. Like, in fact, Sonic 1's platforming is the most satisfying platforming that Sonic has ever had to me. Especially when I was playing it on Sonic Mega Collection with a GameCube controller, because I played the Sonic 1 remake, but it's on Android, so I had to plug in an Xbox 360 controller with its D-pad. It's not very good for 2D platformers. Like, because the D-pad is so big, it takes longer to press back on the control pad. I did not have a fun time with, like, Scrap Brain Zone with that controller, even though I liked it the first time I played it with a GameCube controller. Like, it's amazing how much of a difference the type of controller that you have can make. In general, like, I really like Sonic 1, but only with a good controller. Like, it's got good platforming. The special stages are completely luck-based, though. I don't know why they decided to put so many bumpers in them. Like, I've seen a few ROM hacks that actually make good special stages because they're a lot more linear and they don't have nearly as many bumpers that can send you into goals, making you fail it. At least the Chaos Emeralds don't get you supersonic, so you don't really need to get them to get the best experience of the game. Now, the boss fights, well, the same can be said for all of the classic boss fights. I think the boss fights of the classic era are the best because they're so quick and easy. You just attack him, and like occasionally it's about waiting for your opportunity to attack. Like in Oil Ocean Zone's boss, you just jump under the platforms and then wait until your opportunity to attack. Then you wait some more. But even when the bosses are like that, it's never Sonic Rush bad, where you're bored out of your mind waiting for an opportunity to attack. The bosses in the classic era are fine. Like, they're done over with really quick, which is good. That's how platformer bosses should be. Platforming is not about the boss fights. Boss fights are just an annoyance that interrupt your levels. At least that's how I see it anyways. Like, I don't think it should be a whole epic, dragged out thing, you know? I'm one of the few defenders of Labyrinth Zone. I mean, it has really cheap enemy placement. Like, sometimes the drill enemies can just jump at you from below. But the thing is that the bubbles are always exactly where you need them. There's tons of invincibility monitors, so you can just run through. So you don't really have to worry about drowning very often, and There's also the fact that because the water slows you down, it makes platforming easier because you land your jumps easier. It's a great platforming level. I don't like the enemies, but the platforming is really good, and even the boss fight, I find it to be very satisfying to perfectly avoid every obstacle, because I time and do my jumps exactly right to avoid the spears and the fireballs. I feel like it's really rewarding my skill and thinking ahead. Not like the Sonic 4 Episode 1's version of that boss, where the chase is just mind-numbingly boring and bland, and then you get to an actual boss after that, which is just full of crushers that send you all the way back to the beginning of the chase sequence if you die. As for Sonic 2, I am not very fond of Sonic 2. I thought for sure that I would like it more than Sonic 1 because it introduced the spin dash, and like, obviously Sonic 1 has early installment weirdness with the lack of a spin dash, like you can't easily get up upward slopes in loops. You actually need to make sure that you're running fast towards them in the first place. But just having a spin dash alone, and getting rid of the third act alone, does not make Sonic 2 a better game. The enemy placement and the enemies themselves are atrocious. I played pretty much all the 2D Sonic games by this point, except for like the Boom games. And I just hate how every enemy in Sonic 2 has projectiles that they throw at you. When it's a platformer, then you're by definition jumping into the enemies to attack them, but if they throw projectiles or shoot them from off screen like an Oil Ocean Zone, then you're guaranteed to get hit by them while you're trying to jump at the enemies in the first place. The biggest problem with 2D Sonic in general is that you're always trapped at the center of the camera, so you can't really see what's ahead of you when you're barreling ahead trying to go fast. And that's fine if you're curled up into a ball because it's an extended speed section, although that only really gets to happen in Sonic 3, unfortunately. But the biggest problem with Sonic 2 is that because you can't actually see what's ahead of you, you're constantly running into enemies that you couldn't possibly have seen coming. And the level design in general is just so devoid of speed. I mean, there's random spikes all over the place that will always stop you. And it's not like you run into them and get hit, it's that you run into the sides and get stopped and all of your momentum is destroyed. Like, it's just like in Sonic Adventure 1. There's so many instances where it's not real platforming and you just have to either slowly navigate left and right, like in Mystic Cave Zone where you're navigating around these moving crates that can crush you. I don't think that's very fun. And it's also, like, you just pull right and press the A button. It's like you're jumping upstairs. It's like, the biggest problem with Sonic 2's level design is that they dumbed down the platforming, but they didn't increase the speed of the level design to compensate. Sonic 3 alone had the perfect level design when it comes to being fast-paced for a classic Sonic game. Because it had extended speed sections where you hit a dash pad, like in Hydrocity Zone or Launch Base Zone, and sometimes you didn't even have to do that, like sometimes a hand would grab you and force you forwards down water slides, and sometimes you just spin dash on top of the slope. And you go into an extended section where you go through slopes and loop-de-loops, and if you were smart, you curled up into a ball throughout that time so that you would go even faster. None of the other classic Sonic games have stuff like that, and that irks me because that's the most thrilling part of the gameplay. I like platforming, but if all you like in a Sonic game is platforming and you think speed is just a dumb spectacle automation thing, then Sonic's not really for you. Because Sonic is about the speed. That's what separates its gameplay from Mario, is taking advantage of the physics to go fast. And even then, the thing you need to keep in mind is the whole reason that Sonic 1 was so platformy was because they already thought they were taking a huge risk in the first place by having a speed-based game that was a platformer, when platforming is all by definition slow. That's why Sonic 1 had so much platforming, to make sure it would succeed. Even if the technology was capable at the time of making a 3D boost game or a rush boost game, do you really think that Sega would have taken that risk so early? Just because Sonic started out as more like Mario and like platforming doesn't really mean that that's the perfect way. Like, it's about platforming, sure, but speed is the theme of the series. That's why I love the boost gameplay so much. But anyways, back on topic. I don't understand why people say that Sonic 2's level design is fast-paced, when Sonic 3 exists as the game. Because every time I try to play Sonic 2, I want to brainwash myself into liking it. I want to like it so bad, but I get past Chemical Plant Zone, and it all goes downhill from there. Like, I love Chemical Plant Zone. Even the rising water section with the blocks is really satisfying with how you have to land precisely on platforms. It's very satisfying to get right, and I got through that just fine in my first playthrough. Like, I love Chemical Plant Zone. I love how fast-paced it is, and while it is way too punishing when you screw up because it crushes you a whole bunch, aside from that, it's a really good stage. I don't understand why the rest of the game isn't designed like that, or at the very least, most of it. But instead, past Chemical Plant Zone, you get stuff like Casino Night Zone, which is full of bumpers that send you in directions you don't want to go, and slow springs that you have to spend forever holding the A button on for them to launch you, and sometimes they like to launch you into a loop, but Sonic 2 doesn't really understand loops, because most of the time the loops don't send you forwards into an extended speed section so you can actually take advantage of the burst of speed they gave you. Instead, the loops like to just drop you down onto another slow spring you have to take 8 billion years holding the A button on. Or, in Hilltop Zone's case, the loop-de-loops literally drop you down into a platforming section. Well, I'm so glad I was able to take advantage of that burst of speed. Thanks, game. Like, Hilltop Zone isn't very fun either. I mean, I love the satisfying platforming section with the rising lava, but that's the only good platforming section in the game past Chemical Plant Zone. Everything else is just, you run forwards blindly, hoping you won't run into an enemy. And there's no real platforming, you just navigate through the level, and you don't really get to have much extended sections of speed either. So in general, I don't really like Sonic 2. I want to like it, but the only time I can even find it tolerable is when I cheat to get Supersonic from the very beginning. You just play through the whole game like that. And if you need to play it in Invincible God mode just to have fun, something's wrong. And the final boss is absolutely atrocious. Like, I guess it can be easy once you've memorized it, but it just speaks for itself, really. It's kind of hard to figure out where exactly you need to jump into it to damage it, and I know that if it bends forward, it gives you a free hit on it, but if you wait for that to happen every single time you try to attack it, you're gonna get really impatient, and you're gonna take forever. So every time that I fight that boss, I just use Infinite Rings and Supersonic. I don't think that boss deserves to be beaten legitimately. Not to mention, like, do I even have to talk about Metropolis Zone and Oil Ocean Zone? Like, even people who worship Sonic 2 still think that those levels are terrible. I mean, I think that Metropolis Zone has redeeming qualities, because aside from the terrible badniks that throw projectiles at you and hit you when you're on those rising bolts, like, I hate the bolts. I don't understand why they exist in the level. They're not really contributing anything that a spring couldn't do much better. It just sort of waste your time. But I think that Metropolis Zone has the closest we have to fast-paced level design past Chemical Plant Zone. It's got lots of corkscrew loops, lots of instances where you're going fast. Like, I love the yellow triangles that bounce you back and forth. If we only got more of that, and less of terrible enemies and enemy placement and bolts, then it would be a great level. Like, I like the satisfying platforming challenge of, like, carefully watching the square platforms that create spears out of them, and you have to jump on them at exactly the right time. And you jump onto multiple of them once. I used to hate it, but eventually I found out that they actually create the spears in a clockwise pattern. So it's not completely random which side of the squares that the spears go out of. Sonic 2 has redeeming qualities, like, it has good music. I love the special stage theme, I love a lot of things about it, but I just don't understand why people like it. I want to like it, but I can't. Especially not when Sonic 3 exists. But we'll get to that. Like, Sonic CD, it's very, very platformy, but I can still at least go fast if I want to. Like, I can still hold right and enjoy myself. When I first played it, I already thought this is better than Sonic 1 because of the fact that it had more fast-paced level design, and it had the super peel out and the spin dash. I mean, the spin dash is terrible in that game. Like, you have to take forever to charge up. But the super peel out has the exact same problem, let's be real. And you really do suffer from it in the Metal Sonic boss fight. Words cannot describe how terrible the Metal Sonic boss fight is. There's spikes everywhere that you constantly have to jump to avoid. You can't just go forwards, and like, I know that wouldn't be challenging, but oh wait, Generations did that with its boss fight, so never mind. But I really like the soundtrack of Sonic CD, especially the Japanese one. But both of them have their gems. And as for the gameplay, well, I like most of the levels up until a certain point. Like, Quartz Quadrant is okay, but it all goes downhill from there. Stardust Speedway, like, it has this stupid gimmick where you have to jump onto flipping things to change what's in the background and what's in the foreground. But those things that you're walking on don't change graphics to make it clear that you can walk on them now. So it's just a very confusing level to try to navigate through, and I just hate it. And Wacky Workbench Act One is really terrible because you have to get the platforming exactly right, and if you land on the workbench, then you'll get bounced upwards really high, and you'll get trapped on these stupid long platforms, and you have to slowly walk to the left and then walk to the right to slowly get your way back to the bottom route. It's like the exact opposite of what Sonic level design should be. The higher route is supposed to be the good one. Like, it's by definition good because you're a lot less likely to fall into a bottomless pit there. So you should be rewarded for getting to it by being skilled enough at the platforming that you can get up to it. I don't like how Sonic CD tends to have its level design based around the assumption that you're going to be spending a long time looking for robot generators to destroy. Well, that's not really Sonic-like. Like, the level design is very vertical, not Knuckles Chaotix bad, but like, you can still run ahead and go fast if you want to. The level design is a mess, I'll admit it, but it's a fun mess. There's a reason that I enjoyed the game enough that I played it all the way through 4 times in a row, and that's not including the time that I played through all the levels on Time Attack. So it's a game that I like. The bosses are terrible though. Like, I really hate the boss in Quartz Quadrant, where you have to spend 8 billion years running on a conveyor belt, and only then will Eggman, like, lose. That was really unintuitive for me to figure out at first. And I also don't like the boss of Wacky Workbench, where it's basically just a platforming challenge. Like, you wait for a block to fall that can actually crush you or hurt you, and then you jump to the other block because somehow you're supposed to know that the other block that you jump to is always going to rise higher than the one you first chose. And then at the very end, it suddenly changes the rules on you and cheaply pulls a fuck you by, if you stay on the block, then that's the only way you can survive, because otherwise you'll get crushed by the ceiling. How are you supposed to know that? So I think the bosses are pretty terrible in that game. Like, I don't like the one in Untitled Tempest either, because sure, he surrounds himself with air bubbles, and that makes it impossible to drown, but the fact remains that when you take air, you automatically get bounced back to the ground, like diagonally. That makes you very vulnerable to the projectiles that he shoots out. And since you're underwater, you're too slow to easily get your rings back, so it's surprisingly easy to die. So the bosses are really annoying. I like how the final boss is easy though, especially since it's so annoying just getting to the final boss all by itself. Metallic Madness speaks for itself. It's really annoying, especially one particular act of it, but in general I like Sonic CD, but Sonic 3 is a lot better. Now the thing is, I know that Sonic 3 and Knuckles are technically one game, but I like Sonic 3 alone a lot better than I like Sonic and Knuckles, because Sonic 3 actually understands fast-paced level design. Sonic and Knuckles is a lot more about Sonic 2 level design, where it's like a Mario game. You're just jumping upstairs, which is literally what Lava Rezone is all about. I really like Sonic 3 though, but Sonic and Knuckles, I don't really enjoy. Like, I like Mushroom Hill Zone, and I liked Flying Battery Zone, but only after the 5th time I played it. Because it can be kind of confusing figuring out how you're supposed to progress at some point. It's like past the spinning fan poles that you're swinging around section, how are you supposed to know that you have to go down and then left? And suddenly you can progress with the level. How are you supposed to know you're not just walking towards a wall that will stop you? And plus there's a whole bunch of fire hazards and stuff like that. And I hate trying to run on the rolling things, because sometimes Sonic will just fall and that'll be it. But for the most part, I find Sonic & Knuckles to be kind of a slog fest. Like, Sandopolis Zone is so bland that I find it to be draining how long the levels are. Like, the big problem with Sonic 3 Knuckles is the level length. I remember when I first played the game, I was always shocked and drained when I beat Act 1, because suddenly I was sent to the next act and I was like, wait, there's more? I don't mind it now. Like, at this point, I appreciate the long level length as long as it's a level that I enjoy, because that means that there's more level for me to enjoy. But, I don't know. It's the only Sonic 3 that I really like. I find Sonic & Knuckles to be a lot more tolerable when I played it in Sonic 3 Knuckles, but, like, I was about to say Super Sonic, but then I remember that the game takes away Super Sonic when you get to the Sonic & Knuckles portion of the game. So never mind. Like, I don't like Carnival Night Zone. I think it's really annoying, like with the slow-moving barrels that are just like the slow-moving blocks from Spring Yard Zone. And Casino Night Zone had those too. I also hate the underwater section that Knuckles creates for you. Like, a big thing to me about Sonic 3 is the soundtrack. Because obviously it's got the whole Michael Jackson influence there, and it's because of that that we have the stupid copyright laws where we can't ever get a Taxman remake of Sonic 3 because of copyright laws. And it's also because of that that we can't get, like, actual original Sonic 3 music in Generations. Like, we just got MIDI remixes of it instead. So I honestly don't think that the whole Michael Jackson influence thing was worth it. Like, the soundtrack was good, but I don't think it was really worth, like, Sonic 3 Knuckles never really being referenced again. I just hate how Sonic 2 and Sonic 1 get the most references, while the actually fantastic classic Sonic game is just left in the dust. Like, I really like Ice Cap Zone. Well, Act 2 anyways. Act 1 is kind of more like a puzzle level. You just stand on a thing that you move by pushing it, and you have to jump at the right time or you'll be vertically scrolling infinitely. It's more of a slow platforming level until you get to Act 2, which is actually fast. And I love Launch Base Zone. Like, I love how fast it is. I love Hydrocity Zone. I prefer to call it Hydrocity Zone because it's a pun on water and velocity. Even if it was unintentional, I don't really care. I mean, Hydro City is the most boring-ass name you could possibly come up with. I mean, it's slightly more imaginative than Green Hill Zone, but still, just because Sega says that's the official pronunciation doesn't mean that's the good one. I mean, come on. It's a fast-paced water level. It's easily the best water level in the franchise. Although occasionally I can find Act 1 to be annoying, but it's so exciting. Like, I like how they have that tense section at the beginning of Act 2 where you have to outrun a wall that chases you. Although this brings me up to why I always play Sonic 3 with Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Because when you do that, you remove really cheap stuff like the spring that sends you back into the wall that's chasing you down. There's also a spring that launches you upwards in a Hydrocity Zone that you land on and you get sent into an enemy. So I really hate that. Like you spin dash towards a cannon shooting enemy, and you always get launched up by the spring, and because you carry over your momentum, you suddenly go to the right, and you get hit by the projectile. I never get hit like that in Sonic 3 Knuckles, though. Not to mention Launch Base Zone is extremely cheap in Sonic 3 alone. It's just so much better in Sonic 3 Knuckles. Like, there's so much less fire constantly attacking you. Not to mention you don't have this stupid underwater section where you have to jump off a wall at exactly the right time in order to get into a spinning elevator. And if you don't do it exactly the right time, then you're guaranteed to die. And if you jump instinctively after landing in the elevator because you're so surprised that you did it, then you're basically stuck there in an unwinnable situation because the elevator goes up without you and it won't go down. And there's no air bubbles at all and no way to get out of the section. In Sonic 3 Knuckles though, you can skip it, which is really good. I also like the special stages. Like, the special stages of Sonic 2 were extremely terrible because the draw distance was shit. Like, you could never actually see what was ahead of you, so you'd always end up running into bombs, and you had to memorize where the rings were to beat it. They were better in the Sonic 2 remake though, because it was actually 60 frames per second. But still. Blue Spear, however, there are special stages that you can actually beat all of them on the first try. Sonic 3 and Knuckles is the only Sonic game where I got all of the emeralds, other than Sonic 4 Episode 1. And like, I really like Hypersonic, how he has the air dash, and I really like just everything about him aside from the fact that he's a walking seizure. Like, Blue Spirit by itself is kind of annoying because you're only restricted to moving in 4 directions, and the camera, it always stays behind you. So I get kind of motion sick because the camera is constantly spinning around every single time that I turn around. It's very tense. I always breathe a sigh of relief when I finally beat a special stage of Sonic 3 Knuckles because it gets faster as you approach the end of it, and that combined with the stiff controls, it just makes me really worried. But I do like it. I like how it's actually beatable. Never really knew as a kid that you had to go in a square around the blue spears, and that was how you turned all of them into... I don't think that's nearly intuitive enough. So yeah, Sonic 3 Knuckles is a really good game. I only really like the Sonic 3 part of it, but it's easily the best game in the classic series. As for the Game Gear games, again, I think they're heavily underrated. I mean, yes, they aren't nearly as good as, say, Sonic 3 or Sonic 1. Well, I say that, but Sonic 1 for the Master System, and Game Gear even, is easily a lot better than Sonic 1 in some ways because the pacing is absolutely terrible. Again, in Sonic 1 you go from Green Hill to Marble Zone, but in Sonic 1 for the Master System, it's got a better difficulty curve. The thing about the Game Gear and Master System games is that, well, one, people complain constantly about screen crunch in them. Even though the Genesis games, in fact all 2D Sonic games, had terrible screen crunch. Because they're trapped inside of the camera, and it's all about running forwards when you can't really see much what's ahead of you to react in time. Even ignoring that, because, yeah, the Game Gear games do have screen crunch. I've suffered from it, falling into pits a few times. But the big thing about them is that they're mostly about the platforming, because they don't quite have the Genesis physics where it's all about momentum-based gameplay, like you spin dash on the top of a slope, and then you start rolling down it really fast. That still works, sort of, like in Sonic Chaos and Triple Trouble, which introduced the spin dash to the Game Gear games. You can spin dash through loops and down slopes, but there aren't extended sections of the level where there are slopes and loops for you to really take advantage of that speed. In fact, the level design in Chaos and Triple Trouble is kind of a chaotic mess, like there's no proper design mentality to it. With most of the classic Sonic games, there is a clear, meticulous way that the level is designed. Like, it stops you right before sections of the level where you have to platform to slow your brain down and tell you, hey, maybe I shouldn't be still in the mindset of going fast. The best example of this is in Hydrocity Zone, where you get launched straight upwards and you hang in the air for a long time. And because you're not progressing forwards, that allows your brain to slow down and realize, hey, there's platforming coming up. I should be landing on these rising and falling tubes and jumping from one to the other. So that's good level design. Another example is in Green Hill Zone, where you get stopped by a rock, and that actually warns you that you need to platform. So that's generally the level design mentality that the classics are based off of, and the Game Gear games don't have that kind of structure. They're not like the Genesis games. They're so good though. Like, people say they're generic platformers, but if it is true that they can't have the same Genesis momentum-based physics and stuff like that. If that is true, then it's good that they have a focus on platforming. Also because of the screen crunch, because, come on, I don't think screen crunch, like, tiny screens are really well suited for fast-paced running ahead anyways. Sonic Rush, anyone? But, like, it is good that the Game Gear games have most focus on platforming and on interesting gimmicks like vehicles, like the minecarts and Tails' submarine and Sonic Triple Trouble. So, I like how it has all sorts of interesting gimmicks and stuff. Sonic 1 for the Master System is really the best platformer Sonic game there is when it comes to platforming. I just feel like Sonic controls perfectly in that game, and I really like the level design. Although the thing about Sonic 1 8-bit is that the Master System version is much harder. Like, it has Contra Syndrome in Jungle Zone Act 2, with the vertically scrolling level design that if you fall below the screen you die. That didn't happen in the Game Gear version. And the Game Gear version is a lot easier despite the screen crunch, because even with the screen crunch, there are warning signs telling you they're bottomless pits. And the bosses are a lot easier because you can just jump up to them and it's fine. You don't have to wait for them to lower. And like, there's also the fact that in the Master System version, you have to reach the end of the bonus stage in order to actually keep the extra lives that you obtained. And that isn't the case in the Game Gear version. That's why I was only able to beat the Game Gear version. I had to use an emulator to beat the Master System version. So, strangely enough, I actually prefer the Game Gear version of Sonic 1. Aside from the infamous, like, the game resetting itself if you stay too long in the water and labyrinth zone. Although last time I did that glitch, I had to be actively trying for that to happen. And Sonic 2 8-bit has a way too nasty reputation. I mean, I know that it has a few really bullshit parts. The Springs level, full of spikes and no rings, in Green Hills Zone Act 3, a platform that sends you up into spikes, and then you have to know to wait for it to lower so you can jump on it again because you need it to progress to the level. Otherwise, it'll despawn if you leave the screen. And let's not forget Scramble Egg Zone with its tube. Like, even if you know the directions to press, you still have to know exactly when to press them. And that's not always intuitive, like the whole tube is just one color. I also don't like Crystal Egg Zone very much, which sucks because you need to go through the tediousness of getting every single emerald, which are hidden dickishly, in order to unlock it, and get the good ending where Tails doesn't die. Like, I get that Sonic 2's Master System is pretty infamous. I really like it though. I generally like the game. I like how satisfying platforming is. Gimmick Mountain Act 1 is very satisfying to play through. Like, I love how there's a conveyor belt section where you can time it just right so that you can jump onto the moving platforms and completely avoid being sent into the spikes on the sides of you. I never had any trouble with that section, and I was really proud of that. The thing is that Sonic 2 8-bit, it basically forces you to spend a really long time grinding for lives, getting a whole bunch of rings in Green Hills Zone, or you can use save states in emulator. I don't really like that about it. And of course there's the first boss of that game, which a lot of people died to. For some reason I was able to beat the Game Gear version of that boss on the first try, even though you have to jump really far to the right in order to avoid the bouncing ball in the first place, because of the screen crunch. So I'm not really sure how I was able to do that, but yeah, that ant boss is pretty infamous. I found it harder to get to the boss than to actually beat it, because how are you supposed to know that you can't take the minecart, that you have to roll down the slope and jump, and that's the only way you can get up to the spring that takes you to progress. If you take the minecart, then you'll be stopped by a wall that you don't know is breakable, and you have to run at it and roll at it with enough speed on a very tiny platform that it's hard to gain speed on. So yeah, Sonic 2 8-bit does have a whole bunch of design problems, I'll admit that. In general, I like playing it though. I beat it twice, and I don't have any huge hatred for it aside from those bullshit parts. Like, I have it still on emulator with save states so I can play any level that I want. The bosses are annoying. Like, in general, Sonic 1 and 2 8-bit, I really hate how they force you to fight bosses without rings. Thankfully, the other Game Gear games fixed that. Chaos and Triple Trouble, their level design is kind of a mess, but it's a fun mess. Like, I like how the spin dash makes it faster. Like, Triple Trouble has a huge amount of springs, but I didn't even notice that when I played the game myself. Twice. Sonic Blast, of course, is really terrible. Like, it's slow and looks bad, and Blue Marine Zone is the worst water level ever. You take the tube maze, the Scrambled Egg Zone, and you put it underwater, and you make those tubes suck you in when you get close to them. That's Blue Marine Zone in a nutshell. It's a labyrinth. What's also a labyrinth is Silver Castle, like you have to memorize where to go. But thankfully, that was the last terrible 2D Sonic game for a very long time. And after that was Sonic Adventure.